Welcome back to my channel. This is Peter Chow again on Everyday Law. Today we're going to talk about major development in employment law in the state of California. This is pretty big major piece of legislation. It's called AB5, Assembly Bill 5. Has to do with classifying employee versus independent contractors. A little bit of overview though. In this video, we're going to talk about the history of the law in this area. How do we classify a worker, either as an employee or as an independent contractor? And the applicability of this new law, the AB5. And in this AB5, they developed a test called the ABC test, and how to apply that. We also talk about the exception, exemption, and what happens when the law conflicts with the federal law. Well, a little bit on the history, right? Beginning this year, AB5 has become effective as of January 1st, 2020, right? Traditionally, when we classify someone as either as an employee or independent contractor, we use a case called Borello, B-O-R-E-L-L-O test. It's an 11-point test. It looks at who has control over what, things of the nature. So we look at it, it's an 11-point test that we use to determine either worker is an employee or independent contractor. Now, this new test called ABC test doesn't really completely replace the Borello test. It kind of limits the Borello test now to be only applicable in some circumstances. The stricter test that the legislature put in, called the ABC test, actually came from a case called the Dynamex case that was back in 2018. So finally, the legislature last year codified that case, put it in the labor code. So the ABC test is a lot stricter test than the Borello test. What it does is that it creates a presumption that a worker is an employee unless the employer can prove otherwise. However, the ABC test is not applicable to all labor dispute. It only applies to what they call wage order cases coming from the Industrial Welfare Commission, IWC. Here's how it works. When you have a wage dispute with your employer, right? The first place that you go to is the Industrial Labor Commission, which is IWC, under IWC. So for those disputes over strict what they call wage order, you apply the ABC test. But for everything else, such as determining who's workers' compensation, whether or not someone qualifies as an employee for workers' compensation, for those type of cases, you still go back to a Borello case. Now, over the years now, we notice that there's a trend that we try to classify as many workers as employees as possible. It's as a matter of public policy, because the system believes that if you're an employee, you get paid better. You may get vacation, you get sick days, you get workers' compensation, right? So if you're an independent contractor, you get sick, guess what? You might need public assistance. So the trend has been try to push as many people to become employees as possible. Now, employers, on the other hand, they don't like that. If they have their way, most of them would all be independent contractor, right? One, as an employer, you have to do what they call payroll tax withholding, and there's a portion of it is contributed by the employer, right? You might give them 401k, health insurance and all that. But as independent contractor, you don't need to provide any of that. So it's a lot cleaner and cheaper, economical for the employer to have someone working for them as an independent contractor. So as you can see, employees generally enjoy more benefits. Now going back to this Dynamex case, it was decided back on April 30, 2018. It developed this ABC test, which we're going to be talking about later. So that's what the legislature did last year to codify the finding of this case. And that piece of legislation is called AB5. So AB5 becomes the law in California on January 1st, 2020. Remember now, this law is only applying to labor dispute involving wage order claims coming from the IWC, okay? It is now under the California Labor Code, section 2750.3, 2750.3. This law presumes a worker to be an employee, unless the employer can prove otherwise. In order to prove that the worker is not an employee, but an independent contractor, the employer has to go through what they call ABC test. This is a three-pronged test, A, B, and C. The employer has to answer positively to all three of this test. If the employer can do that, the worker is considered an independent contractor, not an employee. The first part of this test is that the hiring entity, the employer, has the burden of proof, right? Again, the worker is presumed as an employee unless the hiring entity can answer positively to all three prongs to prove that the worker is indeed an independent contractor. Like if the employer does misclassify someone as an independent contractor, there are huge penalties, okay, to go with that. Okay, the first prong of the three-prong test. The court will ask, is the worker free from direction and control, both under the contract or in fact, in order to perform the services? Okay, so the court will say, well, let's see how much direction the company has over the worker, right? They first look at the contract, right? Sometimes, because you can tell sometimes by looking at the contract, this is the employer tells the employee how to do his or her job, right? So if you're not in the contract, if the contract looks good, they'll say, well, let's look at the fact, what this person has to do, how much direction and control the company would have over the person, right? For example, the company wants the worker to come into office set hours every day, right? It has to use the company's equipment and all that, right? And there's a supervisor, right, on site, things of that nature, right? So we want to see how much direction and control is the company putting over the employee. That's the first prong. The second prong, the court will ask, is the service being performed by the worker outside the usual course of business of the hiring entity? So for example, if you're a cleaning company, the worker is also cleaning houses for you. So you guys are in the same business, right? So the court say, well, in this case, the worker is doing the same thing what you guys do in business. So therefore, the answer will be no, right? So if it's no, then the worker would be considered as an employee, right? But another example, let's say you have a restaurant. You have some plumbing problem. So you bring in a plumber. to fix the plumbing problem. Now, you can see that you're a restaurant owner. You're not in plumbing business. So the guy that you bring in to fix the plumbing is probably, at least under this prong of the test, is an independent contractor. The last prong, the third prong, the court asks, does the worker customarily engage in an independently established trade, occupation, profession, or business of the same nature as they involve in the service they perform? What this means is, right, whatever the worker is working on, is this typically that someone will be like in an independent trade? For example, you hire a lawyer. Lawyer usually have law firms, right? Customary. Doctor. Doctor is doctor's office, right? So this is basically aimed at, you look at licensed professional, like medical doctors, lawyers, dentists, people like that. Another thing that we'll look at in this prong is that, is this person really actual in business for himself? Right? So if this person is actually set up as an LLC, right? Then you say, hey, this person is in business for himself, right? So it's more likely the court will say, yes, you're an independent contractor if you're self-employed, right? They'll look at what you do for a living, and then they'll ask, is this normally the type of occupation or profession that someone working independently, not as an employee, right? And then they'll look for evidence, whether or not that person is self-employed or working for someone else. Like, does that person have a business on its own? Now, just because you don't pass any of the tests, the law also provides you with the opportunity to apply for an exception. Okay? Exception. Okay? You can always apply for it, but the employer has to demonstrate, one, whether or not those workers have the means and ability to set or negotiate their own prices. See, this is basically contract law. They want to know the worker, do they have the means to negotiate? Are they strong enough to negotiate their own contract? Okay. B, whether or not the workers have access to direct communication with the customer. Okay. So once they start working for you, can they directly get connected with the customer? So if they're independent contractor, right, they will be able to contact a lot of customer on their own, right? And finally, whether or not the worker earned at least twice the minimum wage. Okay, this is a black and white requirement here now. Okay. Oh, going back to the ABC test, the last prong also, another thing to look at, does this person work for only you or many other people, right? If this person is on business on his own and he has many customers, then the person is more than likely an independent contractor. You will answer yes. Okay, at least you pass that part of the test. Besides exception, the last part of the law has many pages of what they call exemptions. Okay, so I would say first you go look at exemptions to see whether or not you're in the category of being in the exemptions. This is an exemption that they say we're not going to do ABC test. You are considered as independent contractor, like real estate professional. That's how they consider independent, unless you have a contract indicate otherwise. Okay, so this is the overview of the AB5. Hope this has been helpful. Again, if you like our channel, please subscribe. Give us a like. Comment. Give us a comment. It's really important. Okay. You have any question, feel free to contact me. all right, in the comment section. So subscribe, give us a like, and comment. Okay, and I shall see you in the next episode.